Welcome back, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming back, and hope you guys found the storage ideas helpful and maybe something that you can use in the future. Again, I kind of like to focus on keeping things inexpensive, very limited budget as of late. So I'm always looking for ways to keep costs down. So today's video, there's a ton of weathering videos out there, and I am by no means an expert at it. In fact, it's probably one of the things that I do the worst. I've never perfected a lot of the techniques. I usually slap some powders on and maybe airbrush a little bit, and but when I try and rust things up, it never looks right. I don't know. I've practice makes perfect. That's what you got to kind of keep doing. Well, a few weeks back, NSModeler24, I believe his name is Josh. I hope I got that right. If that's not his name, Josh, if that isn't your name, I apologize. But I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, he posted a video on weathering the new Rapido BC Rail C40-8M, which, if you remember from my tour video, I actually have one as well. Now, I'm not brave enough yet, but what I thought was, I'm not going to show you, go to his video, I'll link it down below. His techniques are top notch, and if you've ever seen the results of the models that he does, they're outstanding. Love them. But I thought that I would take what he showed in the video and attempt it on one of my models. So almost like hey, watching a cooking show, and now I'm trying to make what I saw on TV at home. Kind of the same thing. We'll see what happens. And this is a good example that if you follow some of the techniques of other people, if you just keep practicing, you can get better at it. What I'm going to do is I have this Thurn bay window caboose, and for a long time, if you lived in the Milwaukee area, down at Jones Island, which is kind of where all the sewer water goes. It's a treatment plant down near downtown Milwaukee. Actually, it's really close to Summerfest, where the annual music festival is held every year. But anyway, there was always one of these bay window cabooses sitting down there, and the locals, whether it was working Jones Island or in and around that area, Union Pacific, well, Chicago Northwestern used it initially, and then Union Pacific used it towards the end. I think it's since been moved up to Butler, but I'm not positive on that. But anyway, I've got this caboose. I kind of just leave it sitting in the yard, just as kind of one of those things it's just there. And although it doesn't necessarily fit for Wisconsin Central, why would they have Chicago Northwestern's caboose on their property? But whatever. I thought this would be a great model to do what Josh did to his Rapido unit. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a white coat, a thinned white to really dull the paint, especially the dark green roof, which would have been faded over time, over the years. I'm going to work to disassemble it a little bit or mask over. I think it'll probably be easier to mask over like the windows and stuff like that, so they don't get all fogged up and everything. And then I'll use his techniques to spray on some grime. He really went on heavy with weathering powders and then wiped a lot of it away, so we'll see how that ends up working, with the rivet detail and some of that. So probably gonna hopefully zoom through some of this, but you'll get the basic techniques as I go along. So I'll probably take the trucks off and weather those by hand. I have a technique that I've used that I actually do like, that I've gotten kind of good at. So so that's the project for today. Let's get started on this. Okay, first step, I'm gonna go ahead and try and just mask these windows off as best I can. Just at least these primary ones. These side ones you won't really notice if they get fogged up by weathering. But these you'll be able to tell right away. Plus, they would have kept those a little bit cleaner if they were actually, crew were actually sitting inside. There's some windows on the back end here. I'll just try to avoid kind of spraying in those. So I always use just a glass piece, and I've taped the edges just to protect it. This came out of a picture frame or something like that. So just some blue painter's tape, and put some down. Cut an edge off there. Okay, so I've got the model prepped a little bit. I went ahead and removed the couplers and the trucks from it. And I think to start things off, to start off on a good note, I'm going to start off with the coupler or the trucks themselves. The couplers I like to take off just because if you spray them too much, it can end up gumming the works up, and then you can possibly ruin the coupler. So I'll just dust those with weathering powder and put them back on once we're finished. So overall, this is ready. So the simple techniques that I use for weathering the trucks on freight cars, Floquil makes these. Well, at least they did. I guess I should find out if they still do. I bought these a while ago. These are just paint markers, as you can see, enamel paint markers. And so I've got a rail brown, rail tie brown, and a rust. And so what I'll generally do is I usually kind of stick to the rail brown and the rail tie brown, and I'll just go in and kind of fill in all these areas with paint. And I'll do the back sides of the wheels and the insides, trying to avoid the treads of the wheels themselves. And then after I get that done, I'll come back with a little bit of weathering powder and just kind of touch it up, and it gives it kind of a dry look, if you will, like things are actually rusted, and kind of how rust it's dry generally. And that's what I'm looking to achieve here. So I'll start with rail tie brown and go from there. So once I have the paint applied to the trucks themselves, and even while it's a little bit still wet, I'll use some AIM weathering powder. I've got rust, medium rust, and grimy black, and then basically what I do is I just mix it in the bottom of this container, and it ends up being kind of a black consistency with a hint of orange or red for rust. Gives it a little bit of a grimy black look. So I'll just get a little bit on the brush, and then I'll come over and give everything a dusting. Again, it kind of dries the truck out a little bit, but the powder will stick to the paint, and really kind of give it a metal finish, like it's actually rusting. So I'll just do that on the surface of the wheels, each wheel, kind of spin them in my fingers as I go, and then a little bit across the face of the truck frame itself. Really kind of grinds them up well. Like I like the effect, I personally. So there we go. Two completed trucks, weathered. So you see the backs of them are just grimy a little bit, just to kind of hide the sheen of everything, make it look a little bit rusty. You could put some weathering powder on there. I generally don't, but they're nice and weathered and dirtied up quite a bit. So now we'll move on to the next step of putting a whitewash on the caboose itself. Okay, first things, I might have reviewed this a while back, but just to go over it again. So I use this Iwata Eclipse HPCS is my airbrush of choice. You can see it's an external mix. It's dual action. For those not familiar, dual action means that you control air and paint flow independently. So you press down for airflow and you pull the needle back, and you can see the mechanism move back there. And that's how much the needle pulls away from the tip here, and that's how much paint flows out. So you can adjust both. Some of them, the single action, you can adjust the nozzle. And so then just the paint cup itself, and there's a cap that goes over it. I'm not going to put a ton in here because it's just a whitewash. Now in Josh's video, geez, I hope I'm getting his name right, he used a solvent-based paint. I'm going to use, I prefer, I don't have an airbrush booth, so I don't like spraying with anything but acrylics. You should still theoretically use a booth if you are spraying, just to exhaust any fumes. While although acrylics are much safer, it's still going to get particulates in the air, and you don't necessarily want to breathe those. So anyway, these are Vallejo. And this is foundation white. I've come to really like these colors, mainly because my hobby shop has them, but I really like the way they thin out, they airbrush well. So I'm going to thin this out about 50%, and I use Windex, just because it doesn't really cut the color as much, and you still get a good coverage with it, and it seems to mix well with these. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to start airbrushing. Okay, real quick, so what I've always used is these old medicine droppers from when my kids were much younger and actually had to take like cough syrup or whatever. These come in real handy, so if you know anybody with kids or can get a hold of these are really nice. You can draw, as you can see here, I drew Windex out of a container, and if you have a container of paint, it's real easy to then measure out the milliliters, mix 2 to 1, 3 to 1, whatever it is. And then again, when my kids were much younger, these Gerber baby food containers come in real handy. So I just have a clear water one for cleanup after I'm done. The beauty of the Iwata is it's real easy to clean. And then, so I kind of just mixed some white paint, got it to a real milky consistency, so it's not real heavy, and I'll put that in my airbrush and we'll get started. Okay, the compressor's going now, so it's going to be a little bit noisier, so I'm probably not going to talk during this whole thing. I always have a piece of scrap in here, and you probably want to keep whatever you're spraying off to the side, but just to make sure that your flow is good, I always practice with just a piece here, see what consistency you're getting. That looks good. So now I'm going to put, this is a little Lazy Susan that I got from my wife's grandma. She wasn't using it anymore, so that way you can just spin the model around. Okay, so the key here is just to put a white coat on, and when you feel you've gotten the model to a certain point that you feel the paint is faded enough, you can call it good. Like Josh said in his video, you can always put on more, but you can really never take any off. That really becomes difficult, but you can kind of see the difference even in the hood, on the roof rather. The critical thing and the great thing about the Lazy Susan is that you should really come at this with very thin coats from every angle, and that way you get, you're going to create a shadow effect if you just spray from this way, because these raised ridges are going to shield the paint from the opposite side, the dark side, if you will. So if you spin it around and you come this way and then you come this way, you're going to get coverage. But you want to go thin, real thin on each pass. That way you're guaranteeing that you always get, you know, a light coat. So I like, I kind of like how this thinned out. So I think we're going to call this good. All right, so now that we've got the white wash on this to tone the paint down a little bit, Josh said that he seals every coat or every layer with a, well, he used a, I forget what he used exactly, but what I have available is this matte finish by Krylon. Non-yellowing. So this has had some time to dry, so I'm going to go ahead and apply this, and then I'm going to let this dry and then go on to the next step, which is the weathering powders. And the reason that Josh talked about doing this is that way you're not removing what you've done when you do each step. So you seal it up with this. All right, so that's it for the clear coat. And so I'm going to let this dry overnight, and we'll come back to it and apply the next layer. Okay, so the next step that Josh shows is to basically, he just really comes through with a grimy black in the AIM weathering powders and just coats the entire side, pretty much everything. And then he's going to come back and wash it, or kind of, I guess, wash it off with a paper towel dipped in water. So that's what we're going to try. I'm going to go with black on the sides and on both sides, and then probably a mixture of black and a little bit more rust on the top, I think, just because the tops of these probably would have been, you know, neglected and rusted over time. So I've just got this old box that I use. I kind of mix things at the bottom here. So for this, I'm just going to take some straight black powder and start washing the side of the caboose with it. Like I said, for the top, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use some of the black that I didn't get on the model and mix it with a little bit more rust to maybe give it, you know, just a dirty rust color. Okay, so next step is some crumpled up paper towel dipped in water and dabbed off so it's just damp. And I'm still wearing the gloves just to, I want to try to avoid fingerprints and all that stuff. And then when I handle the model, try and grab it from features underneath if possible. And then just start wiping it off. And again, the key here is always to wipe down because that's, you know, the way the rain's going to pull water, you know, or gravity is going to pull rainwater down the model and streak it down. So I'm going to rotate this, dip it a little bit. You know, how much you work here is how much you're going to remove. You know, so how grimy do you want the car? The only thing I will say, because this has molded on grab irons or this grab iron here, I'm kind of getting an unrealistic catch line here where you really wouldn't, you know, this grab iron would be lifted off of the car in real life, and that wouldn't necessarily be a catch point. But it doesn't look horrible, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it. So okay, that side, I like the way that side looks. So now to avoid touching the side I just did, and just kind of rearrange my cloth here, dab it again.
can let this dry and then hit it with a little bit of rust or black. But so that's the kind of the end result. I like how the wash turned out, and it really looks streaked and weathered. I really like it. So okay, so here's the finished product. Actually, in the background, I didn't show it on film, but you might have seen me spraying the last coat of clear coat on. I did this Walther's cylindrical hopper, and I personally really like the results. Probably some of the best weathering. It may not be the best weathering you've ever seen, but it's the best weathering I've ever done. I really like how it turned out. So I hope you get inspired by this a little bit and give this a try. And like I said, I gave this caboose a try because it kind of just sits in the back of my yard, and it's old and should look worn down. If you kind of look and see here, that's how the trucks turned out. You can see them a little bit there. You have a nice kind of gritty, rusty, dry look to them. Oh, and I just realized I forgot to tear the... So there you got tear the clear off so that way the glass is still somewhat clean. And then this one, like I said, I didn't show this during filming, but the techniques were all the same, you know. But you can kind of see the streaking as it goes down and the build up along the sill here. And again, the trucks were weathered in the same way. Put a little bit of rust underneath. This is a bit of a newer car, especially for my era of the railroad. I think these were built in the 80s, so this wouldn't have seen as much use to the point where it is on my layout at any rate. So,
well, there you go. That was using NSModeler24, aka Josh. Geez, I really hope that's actually his name, since I've referred to him as Josh the entire video. But that's the technique that he used for his Rapido, and I don't know, based on the results, I'm kind of hesitant to handle this guy. The clear coat's still a little bit wet, but I really like how it turned out. It's not overly heavy. You know, the removal technique using the paper towel I thought worked really well. I thought one of the techniques that I've never had a lot of luck with is fading the cars, and I thought that worked really well. I think I actually thinned it enough this time. Again, I'm big on acrylics just because I don't have a paint booth. And maybe, you know, if you use solvent-based paints, they thin better and you get a little bit better coverage. I know that the downside of using acrylics is if you spray at too high a pressure, the pigments, the paint will actually dry before it hits the model, and I believe that results in that splotchy you know, result, and you don't get a nice even coat. But don't quote me on that. That's only from limited research that I've done. So one of the things that this video has kind of inspired me is there's a lot of guys out there doing videos like, you know, NSModeler24, Luke Towen, you know, the list goes on and on. Too many to name, but there's a lot of great YouTubers out there, and if you're watching this, chances are you're probably doing some of your own stuff and found my channel because it's suggested because of what you're doing. And I think what is interesting is that we're all sharing this hobby. We're all out to share a technique that we've learned or something that we know works for us. And we kind of throw these videos out into the void and go, you know, here you go, here's an idea. And what I was thinking is, here I took, you know, NSModeler24's video and put it into practice and gave it a shot just to see what would happen. So I'm kind of to a point on my layout where I don't have a ton to do that'll end up being really interesting video stuff. But there's a lot of great how-to videos out there that maybe I just give it a shot and see what happens. And maybe it's something that I can use on the layout. Maybe it's just an experiment, make a little diorama. you know, just to see what happens. You know, kind of like this. It was an easy weathering project rather. It didn't take that long. Actually, it took a while just because I had to let all the coats dry in between. But really, it wasn't that complicated of a project. But just to highlight what other people are doing, highlight their channel, and say, look, I used your techniques, and here's what I got. And if any of you are Simpsons fans, there's an old episode where Homer buys a brick grill to build in the backyard. And after he's done, he's like, oh, that looks great. But he's holding up the picture of the box that it came in, so it looks perfect. And then he pulls the picture down, and there's his pile of garbage, essentially. And then he, you know, laments, why doesn't mine look like that? And that's how some of these projects may turn out in the future. Hey, whatever, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But I feel like this is my way of saying, thanks for shooting video, thanks for sharing your ideas. I gave it a shot, and I either succeeded or I've got to give it some more practice. So, and I think that's you know, something too, is that some of these techniques, it takes a lot of trial and error, and that's why I didn't want to try this technique on my Rapido engine, you know, right away. Give it a shot on this. Now I have a little more confidence. Now I'll go ruin the Rapido and then, you know, lament like Homer did. Why did mine turn out like that? So. But anyway, so that hopefully will be some future videos. I'm going to start doing some research on YouTube, just another excuse to watch everybody's videos, and then hopefully come back with the next video based on someone else's work and following their instructions. So until next time,